5 signs a super empath is silently destroying an avoidance ego. There's a quiet power in the presence of a super empath, a type of emotional force that doesn't need drama, yelling, or manipulation to shift the entire dynamic of a relationship. Especially when paired with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, the super empath doesn't break them down with arguments. They dismantle the avoidance ego with their steady presence, deep insight, and unshakable authenticity. The first sign that a super empath is silently destroying an avoidance ego is their unbothered self-respect. The avoidant is used to people chasing them, questioning their silence, trying to fix them, or begging for closeness. But a super empath doesn't do that. They honor themselves. When an avoidant goes cold, the super empath doesn't panic. They lean back. They don't try to force emotional closeness. Instead, they observe. And this alone rattles the avoidance ego because they're used to controlling emotional distance. When they realize they can't push the super empath into begging, into pleasing, into shrinking, something inside the avoidant cracks. It's not loud, but it's undeniable. It's the realization that their usual tactics, detachment, silence, withdrawal, no longer hold power. The super empath sees it all and simply doesn't chase. And that non-reaction hits deeper than any confrontation. The second sign is the empath's emotional X-ray vision. Super empaths are naturally intuitive. They can feel what someone is going through even when nothing is being said. When they're with an avoidant, they often understand their patterns better than the avoidant understands themselves. The avoidant may try to play it cool, hide behind silence or jokes or intellectual distance, but the super empath sees through all of it. And what destroys the avoidant ego isn't just being seen, it's being seen accurately. Avoidants build their identity around being emotionally untouchable, unreadable, mysterious. But when a super empath looks them in the eyes and says, "You're not distant because you don't care. You're distant because you're scared," it leaves the avoidant stunned. There's nowhere to hide. The ego, which thrives on control and emotional concealment, gets cracked open under that kind of precise, compassionate truth. And it doesn't feel like an attack. It feels like an invasion of emotional accuracy. The avoidant may brush it off outwardly, but inside they're shaken. Someone has read them completely and still hasn't run. That's not ego boosting. That's ego dismantling. The third sign is the super empath's refusal to be manipulated emotionally. Avoidants often use withdrawal, inconsistency, or emotional unavailability as a way to maintain control in relationships. They create confusion and leave others in a loop of second-guessing themselves. But the super empath doesn't fall into that trap. They don't beg for clarity. They don't spiral into overthinking. They simply acknowledge the emotional game and then walk right past it. When the avoidant goes cold, the super empath doesn't argue. They observe and decide. And when they decide to pull their energy back, the avoidant feels it like a vacuum. Suddenly, their emotional superiority is gone. The power they thought they had disappears. And this eats away at the ego. The avoidant's identity is often built on being in control, on being the one who cares less, on being emotionally untouchable. But when the empath stops reacting and starts reclaiming, the dynamic flips. The avoidant is now the one left wondering why their usual tools don't work, wondering why the empath isn't fighting for them. That silence, that calm departure, is louder than any outburst. The fourth sign is the super empath's healing energy that triggers the avoidant's shame. Avoidants often carry deep-rooted wounds, feelings of unworthiness, fears of being truly seen, and beliefs that love always comes with a cost. They bury these wounds beneath independence, sarcasm, and intellectual armor. But when they're with a super empath, something strange begins to happen. They start to feel safe and unsafe at the same time. Safe because the empath is gentle, non-judgmental, and emotionally open. But unsafe because that openness begins to stir everything the avoidant has locked away. Suddenly, their usual emotional shields start to malfunction. The super empath doesn't try to fix the avoidant, but their presence alone creates an emotional mirror. And that reflection brings up shame. Shame for being emotionally unavailable, shame for the push-pull behavior, shame for running from the very love they crave. The ego can't hold its shape under that kind of soft, radiant energy. The avoidant might even start to sabotage the connection to escape the discomfort. But deep inside, they know this person saw them, accepted them, and still chose themselves. That stings in a way the avoidant ego wasn't ready for. The fifth and final sign is when the super empath leaves, not with anger, but with peace. Nothing destroys an avoidant ego more completely than when the empath, after enduring the dance of distance and disappointment, walks away calmly, not to provoke a reaction, not to teach a lesson, but because they've remembered their worth. The avoidant, who expected to be begged to be forgiven without change, suddenly finds themselves alone, not because they were abandoned, but because they were seen too clearly. The super empath doesn't yell or burn bridges. They simply stop participating. And in that exit, there's a message louder than words. You don't have the power to make me betray myself. The avoidant ego, so used to being chased, so inflated by emotional control, starts to shrink in that moment. It realizes that the one person who saw their soul, who loved them despite the walls, no longer sees potential but patterns. And patterns don't change unless someone wants to heal. The avoidant may never admit it, but that kind of loss haunts them. It lingers, because the super empath didn't just leave. They took the illusion of control with them, and now the avoidant is left staring at their reflection, seeing what the empath saw all along, and wondering if it's too late. In the end, a super empath doesn't destroy the avoidant by force. They destroy the avoidant's ego by embodying what the ego fears most: truth, self-respect, and unconditional clarity. They don't yell, they don't beg, they don't attack. They simply stand in who they are and refuse to collapse. That kind of power is quiet, but it's the loudest thing the avoidant will ever feel. And it's not destruction for destruction's sake. It's a wake-up call, a chance to evolve. Because when a super empath crosses your path, you only get two options: rise or retreat forever. The ego won't survive their presence, but maybe, just maybe, the heart can. So if you've ever wondered why the avoidant seems shaken after losing the empath, now you know. It's not because the empath fought back with rage or begged for love. It's because they didn't. The super empath didn't break the avoidant down with force. They held up a mirror with grace. And when the avoidant saw who they really were, behind the distance, behind the defense, their ego cracked under the weight of that reflection. If you're a super empath, this is your reminder. Your strength is in your stillness, your clarity, your refusal to play emotional games. You don't have to scream to be powerful. You don't have to chase to prove your love. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away without bitterness and keep your heart intact. And if you're the avoidant and someone like this crossed your path, don't let your ego push them away. Let it humble you. Let it awaken something deeper, because people like this don't come around twice. If this video spoke to something inside you, give it a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more content on healing, love, and deep emotional truth. You're not alone, and you're not broken. You're just waking up.